Hey y'all, Tracy here with Just Dig It Farms. Welcome to my potager garden. It is a beautiful day here in central Alabama. The sun is shining. It's like 70 degrees. It's perfect day. And I'm just sitting out here in my potager garden dreaming, thinking about where I'm going to plant what and planning my garden. I am so excited about garden season this year. I am looking forward to it. Last year I didn't get to garden very much because of some health reasons, and this year, God willing, I am anticipating a wonderful garden. This past Saturday at Petals from the Past Nursery and Farm, I taught a class on how to create a potager garden. Many of you asked, would I do a live on that class and you be able to attend the class even though you couldn't physically attend the class? Well, that didn't work out. I wasn't able to do that. Zach from Head Family Farm came to my class and I was so happy to see him, and Jason from Cog Hill came, and Catherine from G&G Farms, and Rob and Deb from Generations Homestead, and let's see who else came. My new friend Jacqueline from Cowbell Farms came. Wendy from A&W Mini Farm came. Our friends Connie and Jose came all the way from Georgia. We had some people from Mississippi come. One of my high school girlfriends came. There was a lot of people there. It was over 100 people on a very rainy, stormy day that actually stopped quite a few people from coming. So it was a great turnout. It was a great class, and it was such a fun day. Zach filmed the whole class for me, and I was going to share that with you all, but it's really dark because I was doing a PowerPoint presentation. The room was dark, and I think it might just kind of be a little boring for you. So I decided I would just do a little series here of videos on how to create a potager garden for you all. I have some videos where I've already shared some of this information, but we're going to go ahead and just start fresh and new from the very beginning today and share with you a class on how to create your own potager garden. I have some very exciting news to share with y'all. Today, February the 1st, 2024, we are launching our very first edition of our monthly garden newsletter, Let's Dig In. I believe this is going to be very helpful for you in knowing what to do in your garden each specific month. You'll know what to do in your potager garden, what to do in your orchard, what to do in your cottage gardens, and I just believe this is going to be very helpful for you and you will enjoy our newsletter. To receive our newsletter, all you have to do is go over to our website, which is justdigitfarms.com. When you get there, this will pop up just asking you to subscribe to our newsletter, and all you have to do is put your name and your email, and you will receive on the 1st of each month our monthly garden newsletter, Let's Dig In. We are so excited about this because I believe this is really going to be helpful to you as a gardener. Well, y'all, even though it is a gorgeous day outside, it is very windy. So I came inside so that you can hear me without all of the wind noise. I think the best place to begin is the correct pronunciation of the word potager. P-O-T-A-G-E-R. And it's pronounced potager. Or it's also pronounced potager. But the most common way that I've heard it pronounced correctly is potager, potager garden. A potager garden is a French style inspired garden. I like to say that a potager garden is a kitchen garden where beauty and function meet. So it's more than just your typical kitchen garden. It is about creating a beautiful space, a lovely space. It's a permanent year-round garden. It's so much more than just a kitchen garden or just your seasonal vegetable garden. Potager means the soup pot, which comes from the Middle French word potager, spelled differently, P-O-T-G-I-E-R, which was a cook in the Middle Ages that cooked a really thick soup called a potage soup. And this is where we get the word potager. I love garden history. I love the history of plants. I love stories behind plants. And I love the history of gardens, where they originated from, how they evolved, where they came from, how they gardened back in the medieval times or the Renaissance era, or the different movements, the landscape movements, the victory gardens. I just love garden history. So I think that is very, very interesting. And I think it is fitting that we talk about the history of the potager garden, where it originated from. And by knowing the history and where it come from and how it was designed, I think will give you some insight and some inspiration on how you might want to design your own potager garden. The potager garden dates back to the medieval monastery monks. So this is the Middle Ages. This is the medieval times, around 500 AD or so. The monks created these gardens out of necessity to grow their own food and to grow their own medicine. The original design of their potager garden was 4 square garden beds, which created a cross in the center of the beds. Now, this garden was very sacred to the monks. It was a sacred place. It was a representation of their discipline and their devotion and their dedication to the Lord. And it was said that the 4 square garden beds represented the 4 rivers of the Garden of Eden. And later on, it was said that those 4 squares represented earth, wind, fire, and water. But I love the spiritual significance of the garden and what it meant to the monks. It wasn't just a garden. It wasn't just a place to grow medicine or to grow food. It was a sanctuary. From the monastery monks, we move into the 1300s, which were still in those medieval times, the Middle Ages, when the bubonic plague, also known as the Black Death pandemic, swept through Europe. This pandemic took over 150 million lives. It was devastating. It wiped out towns and settlements and villages and people. There was a shortage of manufactured goods, and it stopped trade. It stopped travel. It was a devastating pandemic. We actually experienced some of this with the COVID pandemic. This devastating pandemic affected economy as well, the financial economy and the social ladder. So back in that time, only the wealthy, only the aristocrats and the wealthy could own land. They were the only landholders back in this time. Peasants or poor people had no opportunity to own land. These wealthy people had all of this land, but they had nobody to work the land. So they took their land and divided it up, some of it, into 1 to 2 acre plots. And they built little thatch roofed cottages right in the center of that plot. And then they rented it to the peasants. So this allowed the peasants something that they would never have before been allowed to do, the opportunity to do, to own land, to rent land, and to grow their own food, and to be self-sufficient and self-sustainable. So this was a pretty incredible opportunity for the peasants. They were really, really, really hard workers. So they took every square inch of that piece of property that they had in their home, and they grew their own food. They grew their own medicine. They grew flowers and herbs to bring into their home to help with odors and pest problems within their house. They had small farm animals to provide milk and cheese and dairy and eggs and meat for their own sustainability. Some of them even had honeybees. They had a few beehives. So they grew and raised everything that they possibly could on their little parcel of land that they had. One of their most common meals that they had was the potage soup. So they would go out to their gardens, basket in hand, and just harvest whatever was in season, whatever was available and ready to harvest. They harvested that, and they would make a nice, thick, hearty soup from whatever they could harvest in the garden. The potage soup, the potager garden. So as far as the design and the layout of the potager garden, you can see a pattern here. So the monastery monks had the 4 squares with the cross as the center of the garden. And the peasants, their garden layout was their cottage was the center of the garden. And then they had the squares and parcels around it of gardens and small farm animals and a little small farm. So that kind of gives you an idea of like the design and the pattern of the potager garden. Now let's move into the French Renaissance. This is the 15th and early 17th century. So at this time, the potager garden evolved into a more elaborate, formal garden, incorporating that parterre, that French parterre garden style with the potager garden. Parterre means on the ground. This style of garden was very, very formal. It's more of a flat. It's gardens on flat. There's no slopes, no hills, no terraces. It's just flat ground. And it's usually the typical geometrical square shapes. And that could either be garden beds, roses with boxwoods around the bed, or even just grass sod paths. And then the pathways were always graveled pathways. The parterre is a very formal French style garden. So in the French Renaissance era, they've taken the parterre and incorporated it with the potager style. So around the 1600s, Louis XIV is king, and he's called the Sun King. He loved the garden, he loved nature, and he's called the Sun King. Well, Louis XIV demanded that there be a kitchen garden, an elaborate kitchen garden, right outside his chateau of the Palace of Versailles. An architect and designer named Jean-Baptiste Le Quintini, I don't really know if I'm saying that right or not, but he was commissioned to design this elaborate Potager du Bois garden, is what it's called at the Palace of Versailles. He designed and created a very elaborate potager garden. It had water basin and water systems all throughout the garden to irrigate the gardens. It had fruits and vegetables and herbs and flowers and ornamentals and shrubs and the very formal style. The center of the garden was 16 square vegetable beds. And then around that, bordering the whole entire garden, was a flower and herb border. Also had ornamentals, evergreens, shrubs, and fruit. A lot of fruit was incorporated into this garden. But this designer even he came in and created little microclimates within the garden to where they could extend the season and grow things that they normally wouldn't be able to grow there. Now, Louis XIV wanted that garden close to his chateau so that he could visit it and he could observe it every day. He even learned how to prune the fruit trees and did a lot of pruning of the fruit trees himself. So I think that's pretty cool. And that garden at the Palace of Versailles, it is called the Potager du Roi Garden, and it is spectacular. Now, I have never been there, but I want to go. I want to go visit it. It is one of the famous potager gardens in France, and I would love to go see that. Now, another famous potager garden is Chateau de Villandry. This is another spectacular potager garden that I would love to go and visit. The French potager gardens were more formal, primarily focusing on edibles. The English cottage gardens were more ornamental, focusing on flowers and blooms and beauty. And the vegetable garden was in the back because they wanted the beauty in the front. And this began to happen in that landscape movement where the beauty, the ornate, the Victorian era, where the ornate and the beautiful is in the front yard, and the more vegetables and stuff like that is put in the backyard. Well, the English began to merge the two styles together, the formal potager style and the English cottage garden style. And the potager garden became a sweet marriage of the two. And that is why I love the potager garden style. When I started studying this style and seeing the pictures and learning about this style of a vegetable garden, I just fell in love with it. It just connected with me. I love the beauty of an English cottage garden, and I love the beauty of a French formal potager garden. So the two being incorporated together is just such a lovely, lovely garden. There's so many other potager gardens and designs and styles throughout history that we could talk about, but I think that this gives you a little brief history of where the potager originated from and how it came to be where we're at today with the potager style garden. So you can see from the very beginning, the monastery monks, the way they had the geometrical shapes and the center focus. And then the peasants had the home was the center focus and the geometric shapes around it. And then we move into the French Renaissance, where a lot of it was geometric shapes, and the center of the garden was the veg garden with borders of flowers and herbs and shrubs and ornamentals and fruits. I think that kind of gives you an idea of the original design and layouts and styles of the potager garden. A lot of geometrical shapes with center focuses, and a mixture, just a diverse mixture of vegetables and fruits and herbs and flowers and ornamentals and roses and everything. Just a beautiful, diverse mixture of all of the things. I am not French. I am definitely an Alabama Southern girl. I was born and raised here, been here my whole life. I left briefly to go to college in Atlanta, Georgia, so I was still in the South. And I'm not French at all. So why not just call my garden a kitchen garden? Well, to me, a potager garden is so much more than just a kitchen garden. It is a lifestyle. It is a permanent year-round garden. It is a diverse mixture of everything. It is a healthy, living ecosystem. As it was to the monks, it's a sanctuary. It's a refuge. It's so much more than just a kitchen garden. That's why I think it deserves to be called a potager garden. Well, today we have defined what a potager garden is, and we've briefly discussed the history of the potager garden, where it originated from. So the next video, we're going to talk about the essential characteristics of a potager garden. My top 10 elements that I think clearly defines a potager garden. Thank y'all so much for joining me. I'll see y'all next week. Y'all don't forget to go over to our website, justdigitfarms.com, and subscribe to receive our monthly garden newsletter on the 1st of each month. Let's dig in.